An Indonesian woman who was accused of having an extramarital affair was raped by 8 men, and now she is going to be caned because of the fact that she had or is accused of having extramarital sex or an extramarital affair. So she's actually a widow, and she's accused of having sex with a married man. So these men found out about it. They allegedly barged in on them right before they were supposed to have sex, and they were horrible. The 25-year-old widow said that she was raped by 8 men who allegedly found her with a married man in the house. The men reportedly beat the man, and they doused the 2 with sewage, and then they turned them over to Islamic police. And now Islamic police are going to deal with them, and they're going to be physically assaulted by officials there for what happened.
Gee, I wonder what gives Islam a bad name. Right, look, I defend Muslim Americans all the time. I defend Muslims all the time because people do stereotyping, and there's bigoted comments referring to all Muslims, and this is not all Muslims. This is in a remote area where they're more backward and ignorant. But unfortunately, this is the kind of stories that give Islam a bad name, because fundamentalist Islam does act this way. When someone gets raped by 8 people, the proper reaction is not to cane her, okay? And if you do, well, people will justly call you barbaric, because that's exactly what you are, right? So now, in this case, think about all the ironies in this situation. They say that they thought that the guy and the woman were going to have sex, but they hadn't even had sex yet, right? They barged into the house, and they're like, how dare you be in a situation where you might have sex, so we'll have sex with you instead. Okay, against your will.
Exactly. Yeah.
So they all rape her thinking like this is the moral thing to do. But in reality, of course, with all fundamentalism, they don't actually think that. That's their excuse, because they wanted to have sex. And they didn't want to ask for permission, and they didn't want to do things the moral and decent way, right? They wanted to be more immoral, and they used morality, so-called morality, to cover it up. Now, okay, so they do that at the spur of the moment, right? And it's horrible and it's hideous. But when a so-called justice system compounds that problem by saying, oh, you guys were right, maybe they were going to have sex, maybe they might have had sex before, so let's take that woman who was gang raped and beat her with a cane. And then they add later, well, they got 3 out of the 8 guys, so they're very vigilant about getting her. They haven't quite found 5 out of the 8 yet. And they say, to be fair, those 3 could also be caned. Oh, okay. So the rapist might be caned, whereas the woman who was raped will be caned.
So I was reading this really interesting article about what it's like to be a woman in Iran. What is it like to date in Iran? And of course, you're not even allowed to date publicly in that country. It's against their laws, and you will face serious consequences for it. So the journalist actually interviewed 3 Iranians in Turkey, and I tweeted this story, so you guys should check it out. It's super interesting. And these 3 Iranians talk about their experiences in dating, and they say, look, the more the government tries to clamp down on people who are living out their sexual desires, the crazier the sex gets. They talk about the orgies that people have. They talk about the sex parties that people have. And look, this is based on the account of 3 different people that are now living in Turkey, and their names have been censored, so we don't know who they are exactly. But still, I mean, I remember reporting a story on this before, a few years ago, and it's true. The more you try to hide what people really want, what their sexual desires are, the more you try to control them, the more likely they are to rebel in certain ways.
So look, so first of all, let's just be clear that nothing sounds more fun than a Persian sex party. Second of all, though, look, that's actually the healthier way for your urges to come out. The unhealthier way is, of course, what happened in this case in Indonesia. And the same thing happens in Afghanistan with the Hazara boys, right? And they bring in like 13, 14, 15-year-old boys to dance for the men, and then they have sex with the boys. And meanwhile, the whole time they're like, oh, goddamn West, they're so immoral, and the homosexuals, they're terrible. They're like, no, I'm not gay. I just had sex with a 15-year-old boy that was dancing for me. They're like, what's the gay part of that? Right? And they're like, what's the immoral part of that? Like,
they don't get it.
Yeah, it's bullshit. It's bullshit. It's bullshit. All fundamentalist religions are bullshit.